So as a family, when my kids were little, we'd go to church every Sunday. Now, the reality is my kids, when they were 2 and 5, 3 and 6, wouldn't get a whole lot out of the church service. However, just about every Sunday at church, near the end of the service, there was an older gentleman named Elliot. Elliot was the super friendly guy who would be back at the church and usher a church almost every Sunday. Now, near the end of the service, Elliot would actually invite my boys to go upstairs to ring the bell to signify the end of the service. Now, while most of the service was spent giving candy or fruit snacks or coloring sheets to engage my kids and to try to keep them quiet during the service, this was something they got really excited about. It meant a lot to them, and it meant a lot to me and my wife as parents. So coming to Calvary, I remember my first Sunday here, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know who anybody was. And before the first service, I'm sitting there, I'm overlooking the people that are coming into the fellowship space, into the hub, as it were. And I see this guy who is ushering named Joe. Now, Joe is standing there, and all of a sudden I see Joe's attention turn to his right. And I see this little girl come running up into Joe's arms, where Joe gives her this gigantic hug. Now, the next Sunday, I will be honest, I didn't actually know Joe's name at that point in time. But the same thing happens. I see this little girl and this family come running up to Joe, greet Joe, and Joe looks like he's the happiest guy in the world that this young girl and this family are here. After that service, I actually went up to Joe. And I asked him, I said, "Oh, so is this your family that's here?" And Joe's like, "No. They're a family that comes to this service, and I'm really excited that they're here, and I want to make sure that they know how excited I am that they're here." Now, I was shocked. I assumed that Joe in some way, shape, or form was related, just the way the family greeted Joe, the way that Joe greeted the family. But instead, Joe was just this caring adult who got excited that this family and these kids were at worship. So a couple of weeks ago, Gina, who is our nursery coordinator at church, she was gone. So that meant that I was in charge of checking the nursery kids in, getting their name tags printed out, and greeting the families. The reality is that every one of those families that came in, I was struggling with the iPad to figure out what names I was supposed to be putting into the iPad. Now, it doesn't help that sometimes my hearing isn't maybe as good as it should be. And so I'm pretty sure that every time I was staring at the iPad trying to get the names down, that the parents were back there rolling their eyes thinking, seriously, you're here. You should probably know who we are, right? And so I felt bad that even though I was trying to be friendly and greeting them, it was taking me a while because I didn't know who they were. Thankfully, Gina was back the next week. And one of the joys that I have on Sunday mornings is watching Gina greet those kids and their parents, and not just greet them, but ask them questions about how potty training was going, or, "Hey, I know last week went blah, 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 blah. So this week, are you comfortable? What should we try?" She's engaging with the parents to find out what's going to make the experience for them the best as possible. Now, one of the things as a parent, I think that really matters is having somebody there that knows who you are, that knows your kids. That matters. Those kids knowing Gina matters. Those kids knowing that Gina's excited that they're there matters. We at Calvary, we sometimes ask the question, what's the faith of the next generation worth? And the answer to that is everything. Listen, I love Elliot. I think Joe is a wonderful human. Gina, besides being one of the most organized and thorough person I know, she's great. None of these three, though, would I label as super cool or hip. But what they are is authentic. And what they do is genuinely care for these kids and families. In Matthew 22:37-39, it says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." It continues saying, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." At its heart, it's a pretty straightforward verse. And listen, I love Pastor Hans. I love Pastor Angie. I think they're great. And to be honest, I'm pretty great as well. That being said, this is a big church, and there are a lot of parents and kids. The best way for them to know there's a God that loves them is for us to get to know, greet, and make them feel like they matter. So the question is, are you going to do this for each of them? Well, of course not. But I challenge you to take a minute during fellowship time while kids are eating pizza or checking in and say hi. Ask them their name. Ask them how they're doing. Do the same thing with the parents that are here. We want to be a place that people feel like they belong. We want this to be a place that they know there is a God that loves them. And if we want them to know there is a God that loves them, they need to be loved by people that love God. And that's where all of us come in.